The iPhone's native camera app does the job most of the time, but when you're really planning out a shot, especially with video, it is far from the best option. Recently, Blackmagic released their own camera app, giving you control over your shooting experience. And it opens up a ton of possibilities that aren't available in Apple's app. Once you give it a try, you won't go back, especially since it's a totally free app. There were 3 big upgrades to the iPhone's video shooting with the 15 Pro. First, you can record video directly to a USB-C SSD rather than your iPhone's internal storage. When doing that, you can also shoot in ProRes at up to 4K 60 FPS, whereas last gen was limited to 4K 30 FPS. And finally, Apple introduced a new log color mode, which unlocks a ton more flexibility to color grade your footage in post without as much built-in processing happening at the time of recording. Blackmagic's app builds and expands on all of these features, with the main benefit being that it gives you complete control. You can choose where your files are stored, exactly what quality you're recording in, your color profile, and a ton more. As far as your quality options, in the Blackmagic app, you can shoot in H.264 or H.265 to use up minimal storage, or in any ProRes 422 flavor, including Proxy, LT, Standard 422, and 422 HQ. That will let you choose between the balance of quality and storage that makes sense for your specific use case. When using the standard camera app, you're basically stuck with 422 HQ, which could definitely be overkill in many instances. In the native app, you can also only record in the log color mode when you're also shooting in ProRes. But with the Blackmagic Camera app, you can enable your log color and switch over to H.264 or H.265 for a really efficient but much more heavily compressed codec. 4K 60 ProRes recording requires really fast storage, and the iPhone natively requires you to use an external SSD in order to reach that quality. But with the Blackmagic app, you can record 4K 60 FPS ProRes to your phone's internal storage. This is a really handy addition if you just need to capture a short clip and want the highest possible quality, but you don't have an SSD on hand at the moment. There are also a ton of usability improvements that make it worthwhile to shoot with the Blackmagic app, even if you don't plan to make use of manual settings all the time. For one, it handles dropped video frames much better than the native app. If you are recording ProRes video on the iPhone normally, and the storage can't keep up with the data rate, the recording will just totally skip video frames. But the native app gives you no warning that this is happening, so you could be shooting video and not realize there's a problem with your recording until you go back to look at it, and at that point, you could have missed whatever you're trying to capture. This happened to me when I shot some ProRes video on my iPhone at a rocket launch pad. We were under a time constraint to set up cameras, and I grabbed a few clips right before we left. It wasn't until I went back to look at it that it was clear a lot of the footage was totally unusable because of dropped frames. Now, the Blackmagic app can't magically make your storage faster in order to prevent it from dropping frames, but there are 2 options for how it'll handle it. By default, the app will notify you if it starts to drop frames. The record button becomes a big exclamation point, and it's impossible to miss. The next way is that you can have it totally stop the recording. The nice thing with the Blackmagic app is that if your recording does start to drop frames, you can easily stop it, switch your flavor of ProRes to one with a lower data rate, and then start recording again without totally giving up on the benefits of shooting in ProRes. Now, beyond the more technical side of this video, the Blackmagic app also unlocks a lot more creative freedom. Normally, when you're shooting video, you want to stick to the 180-degree shutter rule. There are plenty of exceptions to this, but what that means is that, in general, your shutter speed should be half that of your frame rate. So if you're shooting 30 FPS video, you should generally use a 1/60th of a second shutter speed, and if you're shooting 60 FPS, you should generally use a 1/120th of a second shutter speed. The problem is, with the native camera app, you can't actually control your shutter speed manually, or any of your other settings for that matter. So you're stuck letting the iPhone control everything and hoping that it follows what you want. The Blackmagic app lets you keep all those settings automatically if you choose to, but it allows you to enable manual control so you can create your own look. Now, with the iPhone's fixed aperture, you might not be able to get exactly the settings you want in daylight without an add-on ND filter, but at least you can see the settings and adjust them for the look you're going for. Similarly, there's no good way to rack focus in the standard camera app. You just tap and the phone automatically focuses there. It focuses quickly, which is nice, but that can be a touch jarring if you want to use that change of focus in a shot. You can still use tap to focus in the Blackmagic app, but you can also bring up a dial to slowly pull focus and add your own creativity to your shots. Now, there are a lot more benefits to a third-party app like Blackmagic's, including control over stabilization, more advanced microphone control, clean HDMI out, and more, but the last one I want to mention today is the ability to use LUTs to monitor your footage. When you're shooting log, you're recording a low contrast, low saturation video, which is really handy when editing, but not necessarily the best reference when you're shooting. So you can use a display LUT, so you're previewing something closer to the final product after your color correction, but still recording with the more flexible log color. Apple has provided Apple Log to Rec 709 LUTs, which you can check out through the links down in the description. So there are just a few of the reasons to go with Blackmagic's camera app over Apple's standard app. Have you been doing lots of log shooting on the iPhone 15 Pro? If so, I'd love to hear about your experience in the comments down below. Leave this video a like if it helped you out, and subscribe to the channel for more from 9to5Mac.